I'm Emma Martinez, and 3 months ago I was clinging to a piece of driftwood in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, watching my boyfriend of 3 years sail away on our rental boat. Tyler thought the currents would drag me out to sea, that I'd never make it back to shore. What he didn't know was that my grandfather had been training me to survive in water since I was 7 years old. Now Tyler's real estate empire is crumbling, his reputation is in ruins, and I'm living my best life in San Diego running my own adventure photography business. But before I tell you how a sinking boat became the best thing that ever happened to me, let me know where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My story begins not in the waters off Coral Bay, Florida, but in a cramped apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I was working 60-hour weeks at Digital Marketing Solutions, trying to pay off student loans that seemed to multiply faster than my paychecks. At 25, I felt like I was drowning in a different kind of way, caught between the career I thought I wanted and the life I actually needed to survive. The marketing world was cutthroat, filled with people who measured success in clicks and conversions, while I found myself dreaming about the ocean every time I stared at my computer screen. That's where my grandfather comes into this story. Captain Luis Rodriguez had spent 30 years with the Coast Guard before retiring to a small house near Wrightsville Beach. Every summer of my childhood, while other kids went to camps or played video games, Grandpa Luis taught me skills that most people never imagine they'll need. He'd wake me at dawn, hand me a life jacket that was still damp from the previous day's adventure, and say in his weathered voice that carried traces of his Puerto Rican accent, "Mija, the ocean doesn't care about your plans. It only respects your preparation." Those weren't casual swimming lessons. Grandpa Luis taught me to read currents like other people read books, to understand how wind patterns affected wave formation, to recognize the difference between a rip current that could help you and one that could kill you. He showed me how to conserve energy while treading water, how to use my clothes as flotation devices, how to signal for help using everything from mirrors to pieces of debris. Most importantly, he taught me that panic was the enemy of survival, that in life-threatening situations, your mind was either your greatest asset or your worst liability. People think drowning looks like the movies, he'd tell me as we practiced rescue scenarios in the surf. They think it's dramatic, lots of splashing and screaming. But real drowning is quiet. It's when someone stops fighting and gives up. That's why we train your body so your mind never has to make that choice. I thought he was being overly cautious, maybe even paranoid. After all, I lived in Charlotte, hundreds of miles from any serious body of water. When would I ever need these skills? That question was answered on a humid August evening when I met Tyler Bennett at Crescent Moon Beach during a work retreat that Digital Marketing Solutions had organized in Coral Bay. The company had rented a beachfront resort for a team-building weekend, one of those corporate attempts to boost morale that usually involve trust falls and awkward icebreaker games. I was dreading every minute of it until I saw Tyler standing near the waterline, his sandy brown hair catching the sunset light as he skipped stones across the gentle waves. He wasn't part of our company group. Tyler was staying at the same resort for what he described as a, quote, business reconnaissance trip, scouting potential investment properties in the area. At 28, he already owned Bennett Properties, a growing real estate firm that specialized in luxury vacation rentals throughout the Carolinas. When he introduced himself, Tyler had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world worth talking to. His attention was intoxicating, especially to someone like me who had spent months feeling invisible in corporate meetings. "You look like someone who knows how to really enjoy the ocean," he said, nodding toward the waves. "Most people just stand there taking selfies, but you're actually watching the water move." It was such a simple observation, but it showed me that Tyler was paying attention in a way that felt rare and special. We ended up talking until the resort's tiki bar closed, sharing stories about our childhoods, our dreams, our frustrations with work that felt meaningless. Tyler told me about growing up in a trailer park outside Charlotte, how his mother had worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat after his father left when Tyler was 12. He described the moment he decided to get into real estate, seeing wealthy families vacation in properties that cost more per week than his mother made in 6 months. "I realized that if you can't beat them, you might as well join them," he said with a self-deprecating laugh. but I never forgot what it felt like to worry about rent. That vulnerability drew me in completely. Here was someone who had built success from nothing, who understood struggle in a way my privileged coworkers never could. When Tyler talked about his business, his eyes lit up with genuine passion. He wasn't just flipping properties for profit. He was creating experiences, helping families make memories in beautiful places. At least, that's how he presented it, and I believed every word. The weekend ended too quickly, but Tyler made sure our connection didn't. He drove the 4 hours from his base in Charlotte to Coral Bay just to have dinner with me the following weekend. When I protested that he was going too far out of his way, Tyler brushed off my concerns with that charming smile. "Emma, I've been looking for someone who gets it, who understands that life is about more than just going through the motions. You're worth every mile." Our early relationship felt like something out of a romantic movie. Tyler would surprise me with weekend getaways to properties he was considering for purchase, turning business trips into intimate adventures. We'd explore hidden beaches along the Carolina coast, stay in luxury cabins in the Blue Ridge Mountains, take sunset sails on boats he was thinking about adding to his rental fleet. Every trip felt like research for our future together, as if Tyler was showing me the life we could build. What impressed me most was how thoughtful Tyler seemed about everything. He remembered that I preferred white wine to red, that I got seasick easily so he always brought ginger tablets on boat trips, that I had a mild shellfish allergy so he'd carefully check restaurant menus before we made reservations. This attention to detail felt like love in its purest form, the kind of care that comes from someone who truly sees you. 6 months into our relationship, Tyler asked me to move in with him. His house was a restored Victorian in Charlotte's historic district. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The kind of place I'd only seen in magazines. It had hardwood floors that gleamed in the morning light, a kitchen with granite countertops and professional-grade appliances, and a master bedroom that overlooked a garden. Tyler maintained himself. "I want to wake up next to you every morning," he told me, as he handed me a set of keys. "This place has been waiting for someone to make it feel like home." Moving in together felt natural and exciting. Tyler encouraged me to redecorate, to add my touches to what had been a carefully curated but somewhat sterile space. We hosted dinner parties for his business associates and my work friends, and I loved watching how easily Tyler could make anyone feel welcome and important. He had this gift for asking just the right questions to get people talking about themselves, for making everyone feel heard and valued. Our relationship settled into a comfortable rhythm. Tyler would leave early for property showings and client meetings while I worked my remote marketing job from his home office. We'd reconvene in the evenings to cook dinner together, sharing stories about our days, planning future trips, dreaming about the expansion of his business, and my eventual escape from corporate marketing. Tyler talked about buying a beach house in Coral Bay that we could use as both a vacation home and a rental property, a way to combine his business acumen with our shared love of the ocean. The first year flew by in a blur of happiness and possibility. Tyler's business was thriving, expanding from residential sales into luxury vacation rentals that commanded premium rates. He was making more money than either of us had imagined possible, and he was generous with his success. Tyler upgraded my laptop when mine started running slowly, surprised me with a professional camera when I mentioned wanting to take better photos of our travels, and insisted on paying for a wine country weekend when I was stressed about a difficult client project. "Money is just a tool," Tyler would say when I protested his generosity. "It's only valuable if it can make the people you care about happy. Besides, everything I'm building is for us, for our future together." Those words made me feel secure in a way I'd never experienced before. After years of financial anxiety, of calculating every purchase and skipping social events because I couldn't afford them, Tyler's stability felt like the solid ground I'd been searching for. By our second anniversary, I had completely restructured my life around our relationship. I'd left digital marketing solutions to freelance, which gave me more flexibility to travel with Tyler and support his growing business. Sometimes I'd help him stage properties for photos, using my marketing background to highlight the features that would appeal to potential renters. Other times I'd accompany him to networking events, playing the role of supportive girlfriend while he worked the room with his natural charisma. Tyler began including me in his business planning sessions, asking for my input on property acquisitions and marketing strategies. He valued my perspective on what would appeal to young professionals and families, demographics that were increasingly important to his rental business. "You understand people in a way that most business owners don't," he'd tell me. "You see the emotional side of decisions, not just the financial calculations." This collaboration made me feel like a true partner in Tyler's success. When he bought a luxury condo in Coral Bay that quickly became one of his most profitable rentals, he credited my suggestions about the interior design and amenities package. When he negotiated a deal to purchase 3 beachfront cottages from a retiring developer, he said my research on vacation rental trends had been crucial to his decision-making process. As we approached our 3rd anniversary, Tyler began hinting about marriage and permanent commitment. He'd make casual comments about ring shopping, about finding a church for the ceremony, about honeymoon destinations that would also serve as location scouting for potential business expansion. These conversations filled me with excitement and anticipation. After 3 years together, marriage felt like the natural next step, the formalization of a partnership that already felt unshakable. That's why Tyler's suggestion of a special anniversary trip to Coral Bay seemed perfect. "I want to show you something incredible," he told me one evening in early June. "There's a property coming on the market that could change everything for us. It's a marina with boat slips and a charter business, plus waterfront cottages that are booked solid through next year. If we can acquire it, we'd have a complete vacation experience to offer clients. The trip would serve multiple purposes," Tyler explained. "We'd celebrate our anniversary in the place where we first met, explore this new business opportunity together, and he hinted broadly that he had a special surprise planned that would make the weekend unforgettable." When I pressed him for details, Tyler just smiled mysteriously and told me to pack light because we'd be spending most of our time on the water. I should have recognized the warning signs that began appearing in the weeks leading up to our Coral Bay trip. Tyler became increasingly secretive about his phone calls, stepping out of the room whenever certain numbers appeared on his screen. When I asked about these conversations, he'd brush off my curiosity with vague explanations about investor meetings and confidential negotiations. He also started working later, coming home well after dinner with apologies about unexpected client emergencies. My best friend Jessica Wong, who worked as a nurse at Charlotte's Main Hospital, expressed concerns about the changes she noticed in Tyler's behavior during a girls' night out in early June. "He seems distracted lately," she observed over cocktails at our favorite downtown bar. "Last weekend, when we all had dinner, he kept checking his phone even when you were talking directly to him. That's not like the Tyler I know." I defended him immediately, explaining about the stress of expanding his business and the complexity of the marina deal he was trying to negotiate. "Success comes with pressure," I told Jessica. "Tyler's working harder than ever because he wants to build something that will support our future together. I'd rather have a partner who's ambitious than one who's content to stay stagnant." Jessica listened patiently but didn't seem convinced. "I'm not saying he doesn't care about you, Em. I'm just saying that good relationships don't require one person to disappear into their work. Even ambitious people make time for the relationships that matter to them." Her words stuck with me, but I pushed them aside, telling myself that Jessica was being overprotective because she'd recently gone through a difficult breakup. There were other small changes that I rationalized away. Tyler became less interested in our evening conversations, often seeming mentally elsewhere even when we were physically together. He stopped asking about my freelance projects with the same enthusiasm he'd shown before, and he seemed impatient when I shared challenges or successes from my work. When I brought up future plans beyond the Coral Bay trip, Tyler would give non-committal responses or change the subject entirely. The week before our departure, Tyler received a phone call that clearly agitated him. I could hear raised voices through his closed office door, though I couldn't make out specific words. When he emerged, 20 minutes later, Tyler looked pale and stressed in a way I'd rarely seen. "Everything okay?" I asked, but he waved off my concern with a tight smile. "Just business complications," he said. "Nothing that can't be handled. Actually, it makes our Coral Bay trip even more important. I really need this time away to clear my head and focus on what matters most." Tyler pulled me into a hug that felt desperate rather than affectionate, holding on longer than usual as if he was trying to convince himself of something. Despite these concerning moments, I remained optimistic about our anniversary trip. Tyler had booked us into the same resort where we'd first met, specifically requesting the oceanfront suite that would give us spectacular sunrise views. He'd also arranged for a private boat rental, telling me he wanted to recreate our early relationship adventures with just the two of us on the water. "This trip is going to be special, Emma," Tyler promised as we packed for Coral Bay. "I want us to remember every moment of it." At the time, I interpreted his intensity as romantic anticipation. Only later would I understand that Tyler was memorizing details for entirely different reasons, preparing for a goodbye that I couldn't have imagined. The drive to Coral Bay took us through the scenic coastal highway that had become familiar over our 3 years together. Tyler seemed more relaxed once we left Charlotte behind, playing music I loved and stopping at roadside stands to buy fresh peaches and boiled peanuts. For those 4 hours in the car, laughing and singing along to our favorite songs, everything felt normal and hopeful again. When we arrived at Sunset Paradise Resort, Tyler insisted on handling all the check-in procedures, while I admired the lobby's renovations since our last visit. The staff greeted him by name, clearly recognizing him from previous stays, and I felt proud to be associated with someone who commanded that kind of respect and familiarity. Our suite was exactly as Tyler had described, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the endless expanse of turquoise water stretching toward the horizon. That first evening, we had dinner at Pelican's Nest, the same waterfront restaurant where Tyler had proposed our move to Charlotte 2 years earlier. The sunset was spectacular, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reflected off the calm water like liquid fire. Tyler ordered champagne and raised his glass in a toast that should have been perfect. "To Emma," he said, his voice carrying an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "To the woman who believed in me when I barely believed in myself. Whatever happens, I want you to know that these 3 years have been the best of my life." There was something in his tone that felt final, rather than celebratory, but I was too caught up in the romance of the moment to analyze it properly. The next morning, Tyler surprised me with breakfast in bed and an itinerary for our boat day. He'd rented a 32-foot sailboat called Second Chance from the marina, planning a full day of island hopping and snorkeling in the crystal-clear waters that made this part of Florida famous. As someone who'd grown up around boats thanks to my grandfather's influence, I was excited about the sailing adventure and impressed that Tyler had chosen such a beautiful vessel. "I thought we could anchor near Shell Island for lunch," Tyler explained, showing me the route he'd plotted on a nautical chart. "Then maybe explore some of the smaller coves that aren't accessible from shore. The weather forecast is perfect, and the water conditions couldn't be better." Everything about his plan sounded idyllic, the kind of romantic adventure that would create memories to last a lifetime. What I didn't know was that Tyler had been planning this trip for weeks, studying tide charts and weather patterns not for romance, but for something far more sinister. While I saw a loving boyfriend organizing the perfect anniversary celebration, Tyler was calculating currents and distances, timing and isolation. The beautiful, remote locations that seemed so appealing for their privacy would soon become the stage for a betrayal that would test every survival skill my grandfather had ever taught me. As we prepared to board Second Chance that morning, Tyler kissed me gently and whispered, "This is going to be a day we'll never forget." He was absolutely right, though not for any reason either of us could have anticipated, as we untied the lines and sailed toward what I believed would be the most romantic day of our relationship. The morning we boarded Second Chance, the Gulf of Mexico stretched before us like a sheet of polished glass, so calm and inviting that it seemed impossible anything could go wrong. Tyler moved around the boat with practiced confidence, checking the rigging and starting the engine with the ease of someone who'd spent considerable time on the water. I was impressed by his seamanship, though I should have wondered when he'd acquired such detailed knowledge of sailing and navigation. As we motored out of Sunset Paradise Marina, Tyler kept up a steady stream of cheerful conversation, pointing out landmarks along the coastline and sharing stories about other boats we passed. He seemed more relaxed and animated than he'd been in weeks, almost euphoric in a way that felt infectious. The sun was warm on my shoulders, the salt air filled my lungs, and Tyler's hand rested casually on my knee as he steered us toward open water. "I've been looking forward to this for months," Tyler said, adjusting our course slightly to avoid a fishing boat returning with its morning catch. "Just you and me," No phones, no business pressures, nothing but the ocean and time to really talk. He squeezed my hand and smiled, but there was something in his eyes that I couldn't quite read, an intensity that seemed disproportionate to the casual nature of our sailing trip. For the first hour, everything felt perfect. We sailed past small islands dotted with palm trees and pristine beaches, watched dolphins playing in our wake, and took turns at the helm, while the other adjusted sails and enjoyed the peaceful rhythm of the boat cutting through gentle swells. Tyler had packed an elaborate picnic lunch with all my favorite foods, along with a bottle of the expensive champagne he'd been saving for special occasions. But as we moved farther from the coastline, Tyler's demeanor began to shift in subtle ways that triggered an unease I couldn't initially explain. He became quieter, more focused on our navigation, frequently checking his GPS and making course corrections that seemed unnecessary given the calm conditions and clear visibility. When I asked about our destination, Tyler gave vague answers about wanting to find the perfect secluded spot where we wouldn't be disturbed by other boaters. Around noon, when we were approximately 6 miles from shore according to the GPS display, Tyler announced that he'd found the ideal location for our lunch and afternoon of swimming. The water here was a brilliant turquoise that seemed to glow from within, deeper than the coastal shallows, but still clear enough to see the sandy bottom 20 feet below. It was undeniably beautiful, but something about the isolation of our position made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't articulate. Tyler dropped anchor with methodical precision, testing the hold multiple times to ensure we were secure. As he worked, I noticed details that should have alarmed me, but that I rationalized as thoroughness rather than preparation. He studied the current patterns around our boat, noted the wind direction and speed, and paid particular attention to the distance and bearing of the nearest land. This wasn't casual observation. It was reconnaissance. "Perfect," Tyler said finally, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the moderate temperature. "We're completely alone out here. No one to bother us, no interruptions, just paradise for the two of us." He opened the champagne with a theatrical pop and poured 2 glasses, his hands steady despite the underlying tension I could feel radiating from his body. We ate lunch on the deck, Tyler maintaining his cheerful facade while I began to notice inconsistencies in his behavior that I'd been missing for weeks. He kept glancing at his watch, as if timing something, and occasionally looked toward the horizon with an expression that seemed more calculating than contemplative. When I mentioned how isolated we were, Tyler's response was oddly emphatic. "That's exactly what I wanted," he said, his voice carrying an edge that made me look at him more closely. Sometimes you need to be completely cut off from everything to really understand what matters most. There was something in his tone that reminded me of conversations I'd overheard him having on those secretive phone calls, a hardness that didn't match the loving boyfriend I thought I knew. After lunch, Tyler suggested we go swimming, pointing out that the water was perfect and we might not get another opportunity like this. I was hesitant, remembering my grandfather's warnings about swimming in deep water without proper safety equipment. But Tyler was insistent. "Come on, Emma, you're an amazing swimmer. This is what we came here for." He was already pulling off his shirt, revealing the tan he'd been working on at the gym's rooftop pool. Against my better judgment, I agreed to swim, but I insisted we stay close to the boat and take turns so one of us would always be on deck. Tyler seemed annoyed by my caution, arguing that we were both strong swimmers and the conditions couldn't be safer. "You worry too much," he said, diving cleanly into the crystal clear water. "Live a little, Emma. Trust me." The water was incredibly warm and inviting, and for a few minutes I forgot my concerns as we swam lazy circles around the anchored boat. Tyler seemed to relax again, playfully splashing me and diving down to explore the sandy bottom. But even as I enjoyed the physical sensation of swimming in such perfect conditions, part of my mind remained alert to something that felt wrong about our situation. After about 20 minutes in the water, Tyler suggested we swim out a bit farther to see if we could spot any interesting marine life. I was reluctant to leave the immediate vicinity of the boat, but Tyler was persuasive, promising we'd only go a short distance, and that he'd spotted what looked like a small reef that might be worth exploring. "I'll stay right beside you the whole time," he assured me. "We'll just take a quick look and then head back." As we swam away from Second Chance, I began to feel the subtle pull of the current that Tyler had been studying so carefully earlier. It wasn't dangerous at this distance, just a gentle drift that would normally be easy to compensate for. But it served as a reminder that we were in open ocean where conditions could change quickly. My grandfather's training kicked in automatically, and I found myself noting wind patterns, current direction, and the increasing distance from our boat. Tyler, meanwhile, kept encouraging me to swim farther out, claiming he could see colorful fish just ahead that would make for great photos with my underwater camera. His enthusiasm seemed forced now, and I noticed he was positioning himself between me and the boat in a way that felt deliberate rather than coincidental. When I suggested we turn back, Tyler became more insistent about continuing, his voice taking on an edge of frustration. "You're being paranoid, Emma," he said when I expressed concern about how far we'd come from the boat. "We're maybe 100 yards out, and you could swim twice that distance without breaking a sweat. Besides, I want to show you something really special before we head back." There was something in his tone that reminded me of the conversations I'd overheard him having in his office, a kind of manipulative patience that suggested he was working toward a specific goal. That's when I saw it, the unmistakable shape of another boat approaching from the direction of the mainland. At first I felt relieved, thinking that if something went wrong, at least there would be other people in the area who could assist us. But Tyler's reaction to the approaching vessel was immediately and obviously hostile. His entire body language changed, his jaw clenched, and he began swimming back towards Second Chance with urgent, powerful strokes. "We need to get back to the boat now," Tyler said, his voice tight with an emotion I couldn't identify. "That boat shouldn't be out here." His response confused me since we were in open water where any recreational boater had the right to travel, but I followed him back toward our anchored sailboat, struggling slightly against the current that seemed to have strengthened while we were swimming. As we climbed aboard Second Chance, the approaching boat altered course to pass closer to our position. I could see two men on deck, one of whom waved in the friendly manner typical among boaters. Tyler didn't return the greeting, instead busying himself with what appeared to be urgent preparations to get underway. His hands shook slightly as he started the engine and began preparing to raise anchor. "Tyler, what's wrong?" I asked, genuinely confused by his agitation. "They're just being friendly. Most boaters wave when they pass each other." But Tyler was already raising anchor, his movements quick and efficient despite his obvious stress. The approaching boat continued on its original course, the occupants apparently unaware of Tyler's distress. But their brief presence had clearly disrupted whatever plan he'd been executing. As we motored away from our lunch spot, Tyler's behavior became increasingly erratic. He kept checking his watch and scanning the horizon, as if expecting something specific to happen. When I asked about our afternoon plans, he gave distracted, contradictory answers that didn't align with the careful itinerary he'd outlined that morning. It was becoming clear that whatever Tyler had planned for our day on the water wasn't proceeding according to his expectations. The boat that had interrupted our swimming expedition continued on its way, eventually disappearing over the horizon, but Tyler remained visibly agitated. He changed our course several times, seemingly at random, and kept consulting his GPS with an intensity that suggested navigation was crucial to whatever he was trying to accomplish. When I offered to help with the sailing, Tyler declined more abruptly than necessary, insisting he had everything under control. About an hour after our encounter with the other boat, Tyler announced that he'd found another perfect spot for swimming and snorkeling, this one even more isolated than our lunch location. Looking at the GPS, I could see we were now nearly 8 miles from the nearest land, in water that was significantly deeper and more influenced by the open ocean currents that could make swimming treacherous for anyone caught unprepared. "I don't think this is a good idea," I told Tyler as he prepared to drop anchor again. "We're pretty far out, and the current seems stronger here. Maybe we should head back toward shore and find a spot that's a little more protected." My grandfather's voice was practically shouting warnings in my head, everything he'd taught me about reading water conditions and recognizing dangerous situations. Tyler's response was sharp and dismissive. "Emma, you're being ridiculous. You've been swimming in the ocean your whole life and you're worried about a little current? I thought you trusted me to keep you safe." There was something manipulative in the way he framed my concerns as a lack of trust in him rather than legitimate safety considerations, a rhetorical strategy that felt calculated rather than spontaneous. Despite my growing unease, I allowed Tyler to convince me that my concerns were overblown. After all, I was a strong swimmer with extensive ocean experience, and Tyler seemed confident about the conditions. But as he anchored the boat in this new location, I noticed details that my grandfather had trained me to recognize as warning signs. The way the current moved around our position, the distance to shore, the absence of any other boats in the area. Tyler seemed almost manic as he prepared for our second swimming session, moving around the boat with an energy that felt desperate rather than enthusiastic. He kept encouraging me to get in the water, claiming the visibility was perfect, and that he'd spotted schools of tropical fish that would be amazing to photograph. When I hesitated, Tyler became more insistent, almost aggressive in his enthusiasm. "What's gotten into you today?" he asked when I continued to express reservations. "You love swimming, you love exploring, and here we are in paradise with perfect conditions. Are you going to let fear ruin our anniversary celebration?" He was using my love of adventure against me, manipulating my desire to be spontaneous, and trusting into compliance with whatever plan he was executing. Finally, against every instinct my grandfather had trained into me, I agreed to get back in the water. Tyler was already diving in, calling for me to join him, and I didn't want to seem unreasonably fearful or ruin what was supposed to be a romantic anniversary adventure. But as I slipped over the side of Second Chance into the warm Gulf water, I made a decision that probably saved my life. Instead of following Tyler away from the boat as he was encouraging me to do, I swam a few laps around our immediate perimeter, testing the current and getting a feel for the water conditions. What I discovered confirmed my worst fears. We were in a much stronger current than Tyler had acknowledged, one that would make it difficult for even a strong swimmer to return to the boat if they were carried too far away. Tyler was already swimming away from Second Chance, calling for me to follow him toward what he claimed was an interesting formation on the seafloor. But this time, I trusted my training over his encouragement. "The current's too strong out there," I called back to him. "I'm going to stay closer to the boat." Tyler's response was immediate and telling. Instead of acknowledging my concern or agreeing to stay closer to safety, he became angry. "Emma, get over here now," Tyler shouted, his voice carrying an authority I'd never heard him use before. "I'm trying to show you something incredible, and you're being completely unreasonable." There was something in his tone that sounded less like a loving boyfriend and more like someone whose carefully laid plans were being disrupted by an uncooperative participant. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. While Tyler was demanding that I swim out to join him, he was also slowly but deliberately working his way back toward the boat. Not directly, which would have been obvious, but in a gradual spiral that would bring him back to Second Chance while leaving me stranded in the current if I had followed his instructions to swim away from our anchored position. Every lesson my grandfather had ever taught me about survival came flooding back. Trust your instincts, watch for deception, never let anyone separate you from safety, and always have an escape plan. Tyler wasn't trying to show me marine life or create romantic memories. He was trying to position me in a place where the current would carry me away from the boat, while he maintained the ability to return to safety. I began swimming back towards Second Chance, with strong, purposeful strokes, ignoring Tyler's increasingly frantic calls for me to come back and join him in the deeper water. As I reached the boat and grabbed onto the ladder, I could hear Tyler's voice changing from frustration to panic. Whatever he had planned was falling apart, and he was running out of options to execute it. Climbing aboard the boat, I was shocked to see Tyler already swimming back toward us with desperate, powerful strokes. He was no longer pretending to be casually exploring. He was racing against the current to reach Second Chance before it carried him too far away. The same current he had been trying to use as a weapon against me was now threatening his own safety. As Tyler hauled himself up the ladder, gasping and clearly exhausted from fighting the current, I confronted him with the horrible realization that had been building throughout the afternoon. "You were trying to leave me out there," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. "You were planning to let the current take me while you made it back to the boat." Tyler's response confirmed my worst fears. Instead of denying my accusation or expressing shock at such a terrible suggestion, he simply looked at me with an expression of cold calculation mixed with frustration that his plan had failed. "You were supposed to trust me," he said finally, his voice devoid of the warmth and affection I'd known for 3 years. "You were supposed to follow me out there like you always do." The man I thought I loved, the person I'd built my life around for 3 years, had just attempted to murder me in one of the most horrific ways imaginable. He had planned to use my love of the ocean and my trust in him to position me where the Gulf of Mexico's currents would carry me beyond any hope of rescue. If I had followed his instructions, if I had trusted him instead of my grandfather's training, I would have died alone in open water while Tyler sailed back to shore with a story about a tragic accident. But Tyler's plan wasn't finished. As the reality of his failed murder attempt settled between us on the deck of Second Chance, I could see him calculating his next move. We were still 8 miles from shore, completely alone, and he was the only one who knew how to operate the boat. Even though his original plan had failed, Tyler still held most of the cards in a deadly game I was only beginning to understand. The late afternoon sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the water and reminding me that we would soon be dealing with darkness, in addition to all the other dangers of our situation. Tyler stood at the helm, ostensibly preparing to head back to shore, but I could see him continuing to evaluate his options with the cold calculation of someone for whom murder was becoming a viable solution to whatever problem I represented. "We should head back," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable despite the terror coursing through my system. "It's getting late, and the marina will be expecting us to return the boat soon." I was hoping to appeal to practical concerns, to give Tyler a face-saving way to abandon whatever backup plan he was formulating. But Tyler made no move to start the engine or raise anchor. Instead, he continued to study me with an expression that mixed calculation with something that looked almost like regret. "Emma," he said finally, "I need you to understand that this isn't personal. You're a good person, and under different circumstances, things might have worked out differently between us." The casual way he spoke about my potential death, as if it were a business decision rather than murder, sent ice through my veins. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of temporary insanity. Tyler had planned this carefully, studying currents and timing, choosing a location where my body might never be found, preparing explanations for how his girlfriend had tragically drowned during what was supposed to be a romantic anniversary celebration. "What circumstances?" I asked, stalling for time while trying to figure out how to survive the next few hours. "Tyler, whatever's wrong, we can work it out. We've been together for 3 years. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" I was appealing to whatever humanity might remain in the man I'd loved, hoping to find some trace of the person I thought I knew. Tyler's laugh was bitter and completely devoid of warmth. 3 years of lying to you, Emma. 3 years of pretending to be someone I'm not, building a relationship that was never real. He sat down heavily on the boat's bench, suddenly looking exhausted rather than calculating. "I never meant for it to go this far. You were supposed to be a short-term thing, a way to establish credibility while I set up the business deals that really mattered." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Our entire relationship had been a facade, a carefully constructed performance designed to serve purposes I couldn't even begin to understand. Every moment of intimacy, every declaration of love, every plan for our future together had been calculated manipulation by someone who saw me as nothing more than a useful prop in whatever scheme he was executing. "The marina deal," I said, pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. "This was all about the marina deal, wasn't it?" Tyler's expression confirmed my suspicion before he said a word. The business opportunity he described as our chance to build a future together was actually something else entirely. Something that required my disappearance to succeed. Tyler nodded slowly, almost admiringly. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for, Emma. Yes, it's about the marina. But it's also about the insurance money, the property I've been hiding from creditors, and the fact that my business isn't as successful as I've been pretending. I need a clean slate, and that means eliminating complications." The scope of Tyler's deception was staggering. Not only had he been planning to kill me, but our entire life together had been built on lies about his business, his finances, and his feelings for me. I was just one of many problems he was trying to solve through murder and fraud, an inconvenient witness to activities that would apparently send him to prison if they came to light. As the sun continued its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples that should have been beautiful but now seemed ominous, Tyler made his decision about how to proceed. Instead of starting the engine to head back to shore, he moved to the stern of the boat and began examining the life raft and emergency equipment with the methodical attention of someone preparing for a very different kind of emergency. "I'm sorry, Emma," Tyler said, his voice carrying what might have been genuine regret if it weren't for the fact that he was simultaneously preparing to complete the murder he'd started. "I really did care about you in my way, but caring about someone isn't enough when your survival depends on their disappearance." That's when I realized Tyler's backup plan was far more sinister than simply leaving me to drown. He was going to sink Second Chance with me aboard, then use the life raft to return safely to shore with a story about how we'd both been thrown into the water when the boat went down, but only he had managed to survive. It would be a perfect crime, leaving no evidence and no witnesses to contradict his version of events. But Tyler had made one crucial mistake in all his careful planning. He had underestimated what my grandfather had taught me about survival, about reading people's intentions, and about fighting back when your life depends on it. As Tyler moved around the boat preparing for what he thought would be my final moments, I was making preparations of my own, drawing on every lesson Captain Luis Rodriguez had ever taught me about staying alive when civilization fails, and you have only your wits and training to depend on. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine whether Tyler's elaborate murder plot would succeed, or whether the skills my grandfather had drilled into me since childhood would be enough to survive the most dangerous situation I'd ever faced. As darkness began to fall over the Gulf of Mexico, 8 miles from the nearest land, I prepared to fight for my life against the man I'd loved and trusted for 3 years. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.